The year is 1885. A dark shadow stretches across Southeast Asia. This shadow belongs to the great colonial empires of Europe. To the west, the British Lion has devoured Burma, adding it to its vast Indian Raj. To the east, the French tricolor flies over Vietnam. To the east, the French tricolor flies over Cambodia. The map is being redrawn in London. The map is being redrawn in Paris. Local kingdoms, ancient dynasties, proud peoples, they are becoming mere territories, their resources plundered, their futures decided by men thousands of miles away. It seems an unstoppable tide, a historical inevitability that will swallow the entire region whole, leaving nothing behind. In the middle of this imperial vice sits a kingdom. It is called Siam. Its capital, Bangkok, is a city of shimmering temples. Its capital, Bangkok, is a city of bustling canals. Its king sits on a golden throne, the inheritor of a long and storied lineage, but the walls of the Grand Palace offer little protection against the cannons of European gunboats. The Siamese court watches the events unfolding around them with growing dread. They see their neighbors fall, they hear the demands of the foreign traders, they hear the demands of the foreign diplomats. The question hanging in the humid air is not if an empire will strike, but when and from which direction. Siam is trapped, a lone survivor in a sea of colonies. The world of the 19th century was not a kind one for smaller nations. Power was everything: military might, industrial capacity, naval dominance. These were the currencies of international relations. Siam possessed none of these in a measure that could compete with the West. Its army was a traditional force. Its administration was based on ancient customs, and its economy was agrarian. To the European powers, Siam looked like low-hanging fruit. It was rich in teak, it was rich in rice, it was rich in tin. Its strategic location was undeniable. For the British, it was a gateway to China. For the French, it was the final piece of their Indo-Chinese empire. The kingdom was a prize waiting to be claimed. Yet, Siam would not fall. It would bend, but it would not break. This is the story of how a seemingly vulnerable kingdom outmaneuvered the most powerful empires on earth. It is a tale of extraordinary diplomacy, radical internal transformation, immense sacrifice. While its neighbors were being subjugated, Siam played a dangerous and brilliant game of survival. It learned the rules of the Western world and used those rules to protect itself. This was not a story of military conquest, but of intellectual and political cunning. It was the story of how Siam held on to its soul, its sovereignty, and its freedom against all odds. The primary reason for Siam's survival was a happy accident of geography. It was the land stuck in the middle. The British Empire, India, Burma. The French Empire, Vietnam were on a collision course. Both were aggressive, ambitious, and deeply suspicious of one another. Their great game of imperial competition famously played out in Central Asia and found a new theater in Southeast Asia. Neither London nor Paris wanted the other to gain a strategic advantage by seizing control of the entire Indo-Chinese peninsula. An outright conflict between two major European powers over a distant kingdom was a costly prospect that both wished to avoid if possible. This mutual rivalry created a unique opportunity for Siam. The kingdom could serve a purpose for both empires, not as a colony, but as a neutral zone. It could be a buffer state. This concept was a crucial element of 19th century geopolitics. A buffer state was a neutral country situated between two hostile powers, preventing them from sharing a direct border and thus reducing the risk of accidental conflict. For the British, a neutral Siam protected the eastern flank of their prized possession, India. For the French, it provided a stable western border for their new Indo-Chinese territories. The value of Siam as a buffer slowly began to outweigh its value as a potential colony for either side alone. The Siamese leadership was astute enough to understand this dynamic. They knew they could not defeat Britain or France in a war. Their only hope was to play them off against each other. The court in Bangkok became masters of a delicate balancing act. When the French made a demand, the Siamese would subtly hint at their strong relationship with the British. When the British pushed for a concession, the Siamese would remind them of the growing French influence in the region. This strategy required immense skill, patience, and a deep understanding of European politics. It was a high-wire act performed without a safety net, where one misstep could lead to disaster. This buffer state strategy was not a passive one, it was an active and calculated policy. The first great architect of this transformation was King Mongkut, or Rama IV, who reigned from 1851 to 1868. Before becoming king, He had spent 27 years as a Buddhist monk. He learned Pali Sanskrit, but he also secretly studied Latin English from Western missionaries. He dove into modern science, geography, and astronomy. He understood that the world was changing rapidly, and that Siam's old ways of thinking were no longer sufficient. His monastic life gave him a unique perspective free from the rigid protocols of the court, allowing him to see the West not just as a threat, but also as a source of knowledge. When Mongkut ascended the throne, he brought this new worldview with him. He knew that isolation was no longer an option. One of his most significant acts was the signing of the Bowring Treaty with Great Britain in 1855. It limited Siamese import duties to 3%. It established extraterritoriality. British subjects were subject to British, not Siamese law. It opened the country to free trade. On the surface, it looked like a colonial capitulation, but Mongkut saw it as a necessary sacrifice. It was a move to preempt a military intervention by giving the British the commercial access they craved. King Mongkut's reforms went beyond treaties. He began modernizing the Siamese state and society from within. He hired Western advisors and tutors for his children. He introduced a modern printing press. He used it to create the first government gazette, improving communication and transparency. He encouraged his nobles to adopt certain Western customs. He urged them to learn Western science. He famously and accurately predicted a solar eclipse in 1868. That prediction demonstrated to his court that Western scientific methods were effective and should be respected. His vision was to create a Siam that was civilized in the eyes of the West. This was a strategic performance. He understood the European justification for colonization, the so-called civilizing mission. By proactively adopting Western science administration and diplomatic norms, King Mongkut aimed to remove that justification. He was signaling to the world that Siam did not need to be civilized by an outside power. It was a clever strategy to maintain sovereignty by selectively adopting the tools of the potential colonizer. The seeds of modernization planted by King Mongkut came to full flower under his son King Chulalongkorn, or Rama V. Reigning for an impressive 42 years from 1868 to 1910, Chulalongkorn is arguably the most revered monarch in Thai history. He had been educated by Western tutors and possessed a deep understanding of the kingdom's challenges. He knew piecemeal reforms were not enough. To safeguard Siam's independence, he launched a radical, top-to-bottom overhaul. He embarked on one of the most ambitious modernization programs by a non-Western nation. One of his most profound reforms was the abolition of slavery and the abolition of corvée labor. For centuries, commoners owed labor to local patrons, and many lived as debt slaves. Chulalongkorn saw the system as inhumane, inefficient, and uncivilized to Western eyes. He dismantled it, gradually freeing people and transforming them into citizens of a nation-state. This restructured the economy, created a modern workforce, and built a centralized national identity. He remade the Siamese government. He replaced feudal administration and semi-independent provincial lords with a centralized modern bureaucracy. He created 12 ministries modeled on European cabinets: finance, defense, foreign affairs, education. To staff them, he established schools and sent thousands of students to Europe, including his own sons. They returned with degrees from Oxford, Cambridge, Sandhurst, bringing back skills to run a modern state. That produced a professional administrative class loyal to Bangkok. He built a modern European-style army. The old military was a decentralized levy of conscripts. With foreign advisors, he created a professional standing army. With a clear command structure, modern rifles, and standardized training. Internally, it let the central government enforce authority and break regional elites. Externally, it signaled to Western powers that Siam was no easy target, a nation capable of defending its sovereignty, discouraging thoughts of conquest. King Chulalongkorn understood that a modern nation was not just about government and armies, it was also about physical connections and a shared sense of belonging. To unify his kingdom and facilitate economic development, he embarked on an ambitious program of infrastructure development. The first railways were laid radiating out from Bangkok into the provinces. By the time King Chulalongkorn's reign ended in 1910, Siam had been fundamentally transformed. It had a modern army, a centralized bureaucracy, a growing network of railways, and a generation of European-educated leaders. It had also secured its borders through painful but necessary treaties with Britain and France. The kingdom had successfully navigated the most dangerous period of European imperialism. The final step in securing its place in the world came with the outbreak of World War I. Initially neutral, Siam astutely decided to enter the war on the side of the Allied powers in 1917. This was a symbolic but hugely important gesture. Siam's contribution to the war effort was modest. It sent a small expeditionary force to the Western Front. But the political payoff was enormous. By joining the winning side, Siam earned a seat at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. This gave the kingdom a platform on the world stage. As a reward for its participation, Siam was able to negotiate the end of the last remaining unequal treaties. The Western powers finally agreed to relinquish all their extraterritorial rights and to grant Siam full fiscal autonomy. For the first time in over 60 years, Siam was the complete master of its own legal and financial systems. It had finally achieved full, unqualified sovereignty. The journey was complete. Siam had emerged from the age of empire battered and smaller but unconquered. Today, Thailand stands as a testament to this remarkable legacy. It is the thrilling story of how, against all odds, the land of the free stayed free.